what's going on, guys? Currently reporting from some sketchy alleyway in Los Angeles where my band is about to play our first acoustic show. We have a 20-minute set at a venue called the Paramount, which is nothing major, but we did also just get booked for our second major show. It's going to be at a place called the Troubadour, another major venue here in LA. If you guys want to go to that and see Dear Delta live, tickets are down below. I think they're like 15 or 20 bucks. I met a bunch of YouTube people last time. A lot of you guys came out and it was a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys can make it out to this one as well. I think we only have like 100 or 200 tickets to sell. So I'm not entirely sure how long these will be available, but if you guys want to check us out and you're in LA, this is the time and place to do it. That aside, we are going to discuss a session I played on Wednesday at Hustler. But this one was different because Rampage was at the table. I'm sure many of you guys know him. What many of you guys probably don't know is that I've been friends with him for like 5 years now. It's been a while, pretty much since we both started our YouTube channels. And he's one of the coolest dudes in poker that I've met. Because of that, it's not so fun playing high stakes together. Whether you lose a huge pot or win a huge pot, there's always this like weird feeling associated with it. Contrary to popular belief, it's real money and we don't share bankrolls or return any of it. So when blood is spilled, it's spilled for good. And that was definitely the case this Wednesday night. So without giving too much away, we're going to jump into Wednesday's Hustler session. I played a lot of really weird pots, so we'll cover those. And as always, I'll check in with you guys afterwards to cover the results. Alright guys, here we go again, playing $25.50 on Hustler Casino Live. The max for this game is $30,000 until the halfway point when it becomes completely uncapped. In the first interesting hand, there's a raise from Efan to 300 bucks, and I look down at King 3 suited on his left. Not the strongest hand, of course, but I think occasionally re-raising and trying to get in position with this one is not the worst thing ever. Of course, folding is the standard play, but this time I take the aggressive route and make it 1,000 to go. Worth noting, I've played with Efan quite a bit, dating all the way back to the early Lodge days, for anyone who remembers those. But anyway, I make it 1,000, and that whole plan about getting heads up does not work out because Dylan cold calls, as does Audi in the straddle. Efan also makes the call, so 4 of us go into a flop, which comes down beautiful. It's King, Queen, 3. So we flop top and bottom pair on a very draw-heavy board. Only hand I'm really worried about here is pocket 3s or King, Queen, but both of those seem incredibly unlikely. So when it checks to me, I bet $2,100. Plenty of worse hands to get value from, like straight draws, flush draws, and top pairs. Dylan gets out of the way, but now Audi puts in a check raise on this board to 11,000. Efan folds, and when it gets back to me, because I have such a strong hand and removal to the hands I'm most worried about, like I said, King, Queen, and pocket 3s, I think it's obvious we've got the best hand, and he's probably check raising with some sort of draw, like Jack 10 of clubs or Ace 10 of clubs. Even just a naked straight draw once in a while might play this way. So against Audi, a guy who definitely gives action, I'm happy to go all in, as I assume we have the best hand. Audi calls fairly quickly, and it turns out this is a standard cooler situation. King Queen versus King 3. Flop comes down King Queen 3. Not much I could do here, aside from hope that we hit a 3 on one of these runouts. Audi wants to run it twice, so that's what we do. First board brings us no help. Second board, also no help. He actually makes a flush on both boards with the Queen of Clubs, and just like that, we are stuck a bunch of money early on. In the next one, there's a raise to 400 from this new player's Song. Rampage calls on his left, and I look down at Ace Queen in the big blind. Very strong hand. Calling once in a while is fine, but the re-raise also seems like a good option, so that's what I do. I make it $3,000. Back to Song now, and he puts in another raise. He makes it 8,000. Rampage folds, and when it gets back to me, this is a rather uncomfortable situation with Ace Queen off suit. But it's tough to describe instinct, and for whatever reason, my instinct in this case was telling me that Song was a little bit light, maybe trying to make a move. I don't know if it was his body language or just a few hands that I had already seen him play, but I was just getting this vibe that he might be trying to own me. So I figured if he's got ace king or aces, for example, so be it. But against all other hands, we're going to be in okay shape. Let's maximize fold equity if we've got any. I shove all in. He's also not very deep. Obviously, something I should mention. Would definitely play this hand differently if he had a deeper stack. But anyway, it seems like we are in decent shape at least because Sung does not love it. But after some time, he realizes that he's just priced in because he made it 8,000 pre and he's only got like 14 left. Almost forced to call with any two cards at this point. So he gets it in there with king 8, and we do have the best hand, not by much, but ace queen is better than king 8. Let's see if we can get lucky here and scoop. Song wants to run it twice, so that's what we do. First board looks good. It's 4 spades, and we've got the ace of spades. Second board, however, comes king high. Turn card is a queen. Plenty of outs for us, but none of them come. River's a 4, and we end up chopping this one. Obviously would have been nice to win it, but I guess it's better than losing both. In the next noteworthy hand, I look down at 7-6 of spades, a playable one for sure, but there's already a raise from Jerry to 500, and then Efan has made it 2,100 from the small blind. So we're facing a raise and a re-raise. We do have position against the re-raiser, which is Efan. So if Jerry is not going to squeeze us out of the pot, we could get away with a cold call here. That's what I decide to attempt. I make the call for 2,100, and luckily Jerry does not squeeze again. He just calls, so we're going to a flop of king, queen 8 with 2 spades. So we flop a flush draw in a re-raised pot. Never a bad thing. Efan checks though. I decide to check it. I feel like Efan is often going to connect with this board and he's just going into check call mode. Plus we have a player behind us who might have something, but it seems that's not the case because Jerry also checks it back. I mean, he might be checking back a strong hand once in a while, but I feel like neither of these guys are super strong. However, the turn is a deuce, and now Efan does bet 2,600 bucks. We're getting direct odds to call here, and of course with implied odds, this is a no-brainer. Maybe once in a blue moon could raise, but I don't think that play makes too much sense. So I just call. Jerry gets out of the way behind me, and we go to the 5 of diamonds on the river. So no help for us. Efan now decides to bet again, $3,900. And based on the way he has played this hand, I think it's indicative of a one pair holding. A king at best, probably a hand like queen jack suited or even ace queen, maybe a hand like king 10 suited, you know, like a top pair that's not amazing. So when he puts in this bet, I think we have a poor candidate to bluff with, since we have no removal to strong hands and we have removal to folds like, you know, ace 7 of spades or 6-5 of spades, for example. But the problem is I'm a little too stuck and maybe emotion starts to creep in. Even though I try to stay disciplined almost always, for whatever reason, I was just not feeling it tonight, and I decide to take this hand, well, knowing damn well that it's not a good candidate to bluff with, and attempt it anyways. Sometimes brute force does get the job done. It's not always my style. I like to try to be more calculated, or at least that's what I think of myself, but this time not so much. I just kind of think to myself, this guy does not have a strong hand. I'm going to try to bluff. I make it $12,000. Efan now thinks about it for a while, and my immediate reaction is that I'm just not raising big enough. Look at the pot size compared to my raise. I mean, he's getting a pretty good price to look me up. I think I should have made it like at least 15, maybe 20,000. But 12,000 has gone into the middle, and now Efan goes in the tank for quite a while, which already has me feeling a little better about the play. I mean, whether he ends up calling or not, at least it looks like it was worth the trouble, because if he's this close to folding, how bad could it really be, I guess? But it turns out it's pretty bad, because Efan does eventually make the call. I let him know he's good, and sure enough, ace queen is going to win this one. Unnecessary $12,000 gone on the river. Could have just folded, but like I said, perhaps emotion starting to seep in and work against us. Let's see if we could rectify that in this next hand. There's a raise to 500 from Brown Bala. Audi calls, and I look down at king queen offsuit on the button. And this is just another perfect example of being a little bit off my game. I know deep down that king queen offsuit performs better as a re-raise, especially with a caller in between. What I should have done here is probably make it like 3,000 to go and then proceed accordingly. But instead I decide to just call, thinking to myself, it's a nice hand, we're on the button. And it's definitely not that big of a mistake, if it's even a mistake at all. I'm just giving you guys my live thoughts during the hand, but I toss in the 500. Dylan calls in the small blind, and now Sung squeezes from the straddle. He makes it 4,000 to go. Exhibit A of calling with hands like king queen offsuit is you sort of telegraph your hand strength and open yourself to these sorts of raises from players behind you. But anyway, brown baller thinks for a bit and calls. Back to me now on the button, and what do we want to do? Well, probably fold. I know it seems a little nitty since we do have a couple of strong cards, but against a re-raise and a call, we're probably not in good shape with this exact hand. It just doesn't perform well against what these guys could have. I'd rather continue with a hand like 8-7 suited or a small pair and try to set mine. But anyway, I decide to call and see what happens, convincing myself that having ultimate last position on the button is sufficient ammunition for this battle. Whether or not that's true, we're about to find out. Dylan also makes the call in the small blind, and 4 of us go to a board of King 10-5 with 2 diamonds. I do have the queen of diamonds, of course, top pair as well. So all things considered, the board looks pretty good to me. Dylan checks. Sung continues betting for $7,000. Brown baller gets out of the way, and when it gets to me, well, I'm not going to fold. Definitely not loving the situation because I know he could have aces, ace king, even pocket kings, technically speaking. But of course, my hand is just too strong to let go at this point, so I make the call. Dylan gets out of there, and we go to the 5 of spades on the turn. Song's got around 2/3 pot behind, 20k in his stack, 30k in the middle. If he goes all in, we have a no-brainer call. It just is what it is at that point. He could have plenty of bluffs, like any flush draw. He could have queen jack suited. He could have 7 deuce for all I know. Sung is an aggressive player. I know I haven't shown you guys all the hands tonight, but he's already turned over a few bluffs, so it is what it is. He shoves, I call, and this time he's got it. Ace king is what we're up against, so only 3 outs. Reminiscent of the hand earlier versus Audi, where I thought we were in good shape, and it turns out that was not the case. First river is a 4. Second river is a jack. So we lose another major pot. Needless to say, tonight is not going very well. In this next hand, Rampage puts on the double or triple straddle. I start to lose count, but he's in the $400 straddle. Action gets all the way to me in the small blind, and I've got ace-9 offsuit. Typically a strong hand when it gets to the blinds, but considering in this case there's 4 blinds, it's really not that great. But I decide to raise this one up. It's probably as bad as I would raise from this position. Ace-8 off, I'd just buck it. Ace-9, pretty close, maybe a little too loose, but I make it 1,600. Sung makes the call from the $200 straddle, and then Rampage calls as well. So 3 ways out of position to an interesting flop. It's ace-7-6 with 2 clubs. Very connected board, very draw heavy, and of course we could be drawing dead against sets or 2 pairs. So I think it's okay to occasionally check strong hands on this kind of board and see what my opponents want to do. So that's what I'm going for here. I check, Sung also checks, and now Rampage puts in a bet of half pot, $2,500. Back to me now, and I start to look at this board and I wonder how many strong hands versus how many bluffs could he have in this situation. And I think he's heavily weighted to weaker hands that are just trying to buy the pot. I mean, look at all the available straight draws, flush draws, gutters. Who knows what Rampage might be bluffing with here. He could even be using the naked king of clubs. So I think against all those holdings, a check raise is not that bad of an idea. We could also balance this out with hands like 6-5 of diamonds, you know, bottom pair, backdoor flush draw, all sorts of like backdoor aggression that we might utilize here to balance out strong hands. So I decide to check raise. Already a somewhat weird pot developing, but I make it $9,000 to go. Sung is out of there and Rampage makes the call. So we're going off to a turn in a bloated pot, which sucks. It's the 4 of clubs, so all sorts of draws get there now, the most obvious being the flush draw, and of course 8-5 suited, which is an open-ender on the flop, also has improved to a straight. Just a terrible card for me. I check, and now Rampage bets pretty small, $6,000, which is around a quarter pot. We only have to be right here 1 out of like 4 or 5 times, you know, but be that as it may, I just don't think we're almost ever good at this point. I think a lot of his hands that we're beating would check back at this point, like say a smaller ace or maybe a hand like 8-7 suited. Those hands might check. They might bet this small. I don't know. I really hope I don't fold this one and he shows me a worse hand like ace deuce suited, for example. But I do let this one go, just thinking to myself I could have a lot of better hands to continue with. And luckily, because the stand-up game is on, Rampage flips his cards over, and I'm happy to see it was a good fold as he turned the nuts. So it could have been worse, but still kind of sucks watching this $29,000 pot go the wrong direction, or maybe the right direction, depending who you're rooting for. And I guess now is as good a time as any for you guys to decide who you are rooting for, because we are entering the hand of the night, guys. And this is a super weird one. So remember how I said the stand-up game is on? Well, it kind of is. It's a variant of it. This one's called the bounty stand-up game, which just means if you win 3 hands in a row, everyone at the table owes you $1,000 per player. So you could stand to win like $8K if you just win 3 hands in a row. It's been highlighted on this channel before. I've recently played a couple of sessions where this game is in effect, and it definitely changes things. In this one, Rampage has won 2 hands, which means if he wins 1 more, we all owe him $1,000. Usually that's everyone's indication to try to play a little bit of defense. Things get kind of funky when people have 2 buttons because you got to protect the 1K bounty not leaving your stack, right? So here's what happens in this one. Rampage straddles for 400, and I decide to call blind from the cutoff, aka sleeper, call, limp. I don't really know what to call it, but the point of this is to try to get myself last position pre-flop, because if Rampage raises once it gets to him, then I'm left to act with essentially what's called an uncapped range, which just means I could have any 2 cards, really. So that's what I do. I call 400. Dylan also in there with Jack 4 offsuit. The man is playing some defense. Sung also defending like a champ, $400 with 5-3 off, and then it gets to Rampage in the straddle, who decides to check. So that's good news. He's gonna have to beat 3 different hands in order to win the bounty game. As you guys can see, we're all having a laugh here. This is a pretty fun side game. I recommend trying it in your local games. But anyway, we go to a flop, which comes down King 10-7. Sung checks, Rampage bets 3,000, and I look down at King Jack offsuit. I can't believe how good my hand is, given that I just called blind. We've got top pair, and a very good top pair at that, especially when it's a limped pot. So I'm quite happy in this situation. We've got position, and Rampage leading out for a double pot sized bet. Now, we don't have to sit here and pretend Rampage does not go crazy sometimes with all sorts of junk. I pretty much assume I've got the nuts at this point. I mean, if he had King 10, he would have raised pre-flop. If he had Ace King, King Queen, pocket 10s, pocket 7s, any strong hand on this board, really, he would have raised pre-flop. The only hand I'm worried about slightly, I guess, is 10-7. But even against that hand, we're not in awful shape by any means. So when it gets to me, I decide to already start making this hand weirder than it is and raise to 6,000, the old min raise. This is completely off the book. This is not something you should really ever implement, but this is just merely based on me and Ethan's history and the fact that clicking buttons against a friend is fun sometimes. So I make it 6,000 to go. Dylan and Song are out of there, so it looks like I am the last defender left standing. But like I said, I've got a strong hand and I'm happy with the situation. Until Rampage does something even more odd and puts in another raise out of position, which I completely did not understand. $15,000, and I felt like this just didn't make sense. Maybe I'm missing something, but I felt like if he had a super strong hand, he should just trap at this point, just to leave my bluffs in there. And if he has a bluff, then why is he raising again when I've shown strength? I would prefer him to call and then check raise the turn if he does have a hand like 8-9 or Queen 9 suited, Jack 8, these sorts of weird backdoor flush draws perhaps. So yeah, I had no idea exactly what this meant. Back to me now, and I'm still thinking that I've got the best hand almost always in this spot. I felt like what was most likely is Rampage has a king, and he wasn't completely sure on how to play it after my click on the flop. Essentially, my min raise is what makes this hand so weird, because now I'm thinking to myself, did I induce this re-click from him? Is this my fault? What's he thinking I have? What do I think he has? Sometimes, you enter the twilight zone of your stream of consciousness. Your thoughts just kind of go all over the place and you lose sight of clarity in a hand. That's exactly what happened to me here, as I decide to just rip it all in there, try to deny maximum equity from open-enders or whatever bluffs he might have, and of course capitalize if he did flop a king. as I assume I would have the best king possible since he did not raise before the flop. Rampage now tanks it up forever, and at this point I am quite confident that he's got a king, and he probably can't fold it. He thinks and thinks and thinks before eventually calling. So that looks like good news, and then he flips over bottom 2 pair. I did not expect that whatsoever. It was really a cold shower to see him turn over those cards because, yeah, first of all, when we didn't get snap called, I just assumed that we were ahead. And second of all, how many unlucky flops can we possibly get in one night? I mean, come on. But anyway, we've got $191,000 in the middle. We go for 2 runouts since the pot is huge. First turn is a 4, and then we hit a jack on the river. Yep, just like that. We suck out. At least we're going to chop this pot, which is great news. I'm happy to just divide this one at this point since I got it in bad. But then the second turn is a king. And just like that, we win twice after getting it in bad. I think we were like a 2-1 dog. We end up winning twice, guys. I can't remember the last time I got it in bad and scooped 2 boards. I think it was against, I want to say, Ryan Feldman a few months ago, where I got it all in with queens and he had kings. I think I won either 1 or 2 runouts in that hand, but yeah, this was an insane hand. I don't know what's going on in 2025, but there have been some fireworks going on in my poker career. Unfortunately for Rampage, after being stuck a bunch of money, this was the last of his chips that he brought to Hustler, and he was done for the night. So kind of brutal way to end the session with him. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to play much since this was only like 2 hours into the game. But yeah, this just goes to show how rough poker can be sometimes and how much luck has to do with it, because it very easily could have been me on the other end of this one. Anyways, we're going to keep this going, guys. Poker is not over tonight. In this next one, there's a raise from Jerry to $500. Audi re-raises to $2,000, and for what feels like the 5th time tonight or something, I look down at a playable hand, but we're facing a raise and a re-raise already. Pocket 8s in the straddle, somewhat uncomfortable situation already, but it's a pretty strong hand, especially as Audi has raised from the small blind to a not very large sizing, and I know that he re-raises pre-flop with all sorts of stuff that isn't necessarily amazing. Like he could have ace jack here, for example. So I decide to take initiative and make it 6,000. We're pretty deep, and pocket 8s plays well post flop in position. So 6K in there. Jerry gets out of the way, but Audi makes the call. So we're going heads up to a flop, which looks pretty good for my hand. It's jack 6-3 rainbow. Pocket 8's looking fairly healthy on this kind of board. Of course, he could have a bigger pocket pair like 9s or 10s, even pocket jacks. He could have ace jack, like I said, but so many other hands that miss, right? Like king queen, king 10 suited, ace 10. You guys get the idea. So when he checks, I continue betting. Half pot is the size I go with here. Contrary to popular belief, you're not supposed to bet super small in 4-bet pots all the time. It kind of depends on, well, whatever. We're not, about to go crash course mode here, but I bet half pot, 6,400. Audi now makes the call, which I think is fine. I still feel pretty good about my hand, and especially so when the turn comes the 5 of hearts. Another clean card. We're beating plenty of holdings that he might continue with, of course, but this time when he checks, I decide to check it back. Not necessarily expecting to be behind, but it's unclear how much value we can get from worse in this spot. So I kind of play my hand like a bluff catcher and go to a river, which is the 7 of clubs. A few less hands that we're beating now, but Audi checks again, and I feel like we've probably got the best hand, like against ace queen, maybe even ace king, but maybe we're behind. So I decide to just check it back, and what do you know, Audi has pocket kings, a very strong holding which he somewhat under reps. But yeah, we lose this one as well. $25,000 pot going his way. He's having a good night, which I guess is fair. Audi has run pretty bad the last few months on Hustler, so sometimes it's only fair that he wins a bunch and destroys me in every pot we play. Next, we pick up 7-6 suited, again, also the spade variety. Same hand as a few hours ago. In this one, there's a raise to 300. Austin calls in the small blind, and I decide to squeeze here. Efan's raises from the button, and Austin called in the small blind, so very nice hand to squeeze with here. I make it 4,000. And then something super annoying happens where Jerry, off of a short stack, puts in a raise to 10,000. Both of the other guys fold, but when it gets back to me, I decide to call, and this is just awful. We're out of position, and Jerry does not have anywhere near the amount of chips behind to make this call worth it. Essentially kind of burning money here to make this call. I mean, sure, it's going to look great the times that we suck out, or the times that he's got ace king and we win with like a single pair of sixes or whatever. But for the most part, a hand like this out of position at a very shallow stack depth, you should just forget it. But frustration and the fact that I can't seem to really get anything going aside from that king jack suck out tonight has me tossing the chips in there. So I make the call, 20k in the middle, and we completely miss. Queen 9-4, no spade. I check, Jerry jams, and I fold. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you burn $10,000 in about 30 seconds. Not proud of myself on this night. It's little pots like these that, you know, culminate into a big loss or just an overall bad session. And it's stuff, like I said earlier, that I've been trying to eliminate from my game, and something that I think I've been getting a lot better at, but clearly not, because on this night I was just in a bad mood for most of the night. I don't really know why. But the silver lining is we arrive at the last hand. Every night comes to an end, both the good and the bad. And here we go. In this one, I have 9-8 off suit. I raised to $500 over a limper from the small blind. This is just way too aggressive. Trying to impose my will on these guys, and that's just not a good idea. But anyway, I make it 500. Jerry calls in the big blind with threes. Audi calls after limping in, and we go three ways to a flop of 5-4 deuce. 2 diamonds. Nothing going on for me, so I check, and now Jerry checks as well. Audi checks behind, and we go to a turn card, still 3 of us, which is the queen of spades. I check again, but I have some plans now, because if anyone had something super strong, they probably would have bet the flop. Even a draw, like a flush draw or a straight draw, they probably would have bet the flop after I, the initial raiser, checked. So when the turn comes to queen of spades, I check again, but I'm trying to see what these guys do, and perhaps a check raise is in order here. Jerry now bets $1,000. Looks like a probing bet to me of sorts. Audi gets out of the way, and I decide to do something pretty unorthodox and attack this bet. The reason I say it's unorthodox is because my hand is just trash to do this with. It would be a really cool play with a hand like 6-7 or 8-7 suited even. You know, you have like overs to the flop and a gutter. But 9-8 off is just, it's just way too bad. But anyway, I raise it up. I make it $4,500 to go. Jerry thinks for a bit and makes the call. I still think he's got just a medium strength hand at this point. Even a queen I don't see him having too often. Most likely I think he's got a hand like ace-4, maybe a hand like pocket sixes once in a while, 3-4 suited, who knows. Those kind of holdings where they want to see the river but they're not in love with the situation. So when the river comes, another 5 and the board is paired, I decide to go for gusto. I thought he had 20,000 left, which would be double a pot-sized bet. I failed to see that he actually had some red chips. From where I'm sitting, those weren't visible, so I end up shoving for triple the pot size, which is just another of the many mistakes I made on this night. It's supposed to be only double pot, but I just figured how much would I shove if I had a strong hand that played this way, like any overpair, pocket queens, ace-3 suited, all these sorts of holdings that might go for the double check and then raise line. Yeah, I end up shoving for 30k, and Jerry does fold his pocket threes. So this one does work out, I guess. We win the pot, but by no means am I happy with this hand. Just kind of telling the story of this night, guys. Clearly not my best work, but as always, I want to bring you guys on the journey for better or worse. I hope you all enjoyed the hands. Stay tuned for some final thoughts. Yeah, so as you guys saw, not my best session ever on Hustler Casino Live, not even close. I played poorly, I ran not great, and the result was I lost a bunch of money. I was in for, I don't remember exactly how much, but left with $83,000 less than that. So that's a bunch of cash to lose in a short period of time, which I think just highlights the volatility of high stakes poker and how brutal it can be. Yeah, it's awesome when you win a bunch in one night, but 83k gone just like that. There's not a lot of industries where that'll happen. However, I did have a good time. It's always fun seeing Ethan, or Rampage.
We don't get to run into each other too often. He's very busy and I'm kind of busy too, but it is nice hanging out. Unfortunately, it was over a battle of chips. I kind of prefer hanging out with friends at dinner or having drinks, not really, you know, going to war for a bunch of money, but we take what we can get. So it's unfortunate for him. I know he's been running bad lately. I'm sure it'll turn around. It always does. But yeah, that's how my night went. Pretty much the only big pot I won was against him. Aside from that, it felt like I lost every hand, and that's not really ideal. So looking forward to getting back on track. Hopefully things can pick up again and I start winning. We'll see. Stay tuned for the next video. For today though, that's all I have. And don't forget, if you want to see my band live, Dear Delta, tickets are down below. We are playing April 19th at the Troubadour. It's going to be great. You should make it out. All right, guys, until next time, good luck at your local tables. As always, thank you for watching. Peace.